Hi, I'm Johannes and I'm the responsible product manager for industrial and IoT at Paessler. And in this video, I want to introduce you to our latest extension of the PRTG product family, the PRTG OPC UA Server. Let's dive in. So let's start with the installation process of our Paessler PRTG OPC UA Server. And as I said before, we have to set up some prerequisites before. In our case here, PRTG is already installed. All we need to do is set up the API key and provide the proper tags. But let's dive in and then I show you the details. So now we are here in PRTG. We already have a simplified production environment. We have 2 production lines here, a network containing a managed switch. And before we start with the installation process, as I said, we need to provide a proper API key. You can do this if you go to Setup, Account Settings, and API Keys. We log in. And as you can see here, currently no API key is listed, so we add a new one. The name is OPC UA Server Access. Description is API key for my OPC UA server for PRTG. And the access level depends on the version of the UA server you want to use. So if you're using a basic or advanced version, read access is good enough. If you want to utilize the full potential and choose the professional version, then we need to use here acknowledge access, and that's what I point in here. And then we get the API key over here. And I just copy it out for later. And I just put it in here. So we can reuse it in a second. So this is already set up. And one thing is how we export the PRTG data to OPC UA is a very simple mechanism. We use the tags inside PRTG. So if you have already properly tagged your devices, your groups, your probes, then everything is prepared and you can just reuse that one. If you haven't used tags before, I will show you now how you can do that. So depending on what you want to show in the UA space, you need to properly set the tag. So in our case, I have here an OPC UA custom sensor. I would like to export the state of the sensor and the data later on. So I go into settings, and as we can see here, we have tags already assigned to that one, so OPC UA and OPC UA custom, but I would like to add a new one, and only objects with this tag will be later on exported. And this tag is called UA export to show that everything will be exported. And now I save, and I do the same, for example, on our network group, so not on the single switch, but on the group. And I go in here and place the tag UA export. It's already there. And I even go to the switch and want to demonstrate one more aspect, as you can basically support multiple tags inside the UA server. So we now use UA export for the sensor and the group, and for the device now I want to use UA export 2. And now it's stored. So inside PRTG, everything is now prepared. We set up the API key, we provided the proper tags to export, and now we can actually start installing the OPC UA server. That's quite easy. So we have our installer here already, and we just start. You agree to the terms, and we proceed. As a requirement, we have here Visual C++, which will be automatically installed. And now we are in the setup wizard of our OPC UA server. So we go next. Now we need to provide a proper key. In our case here, it's my own key, but this key is of course provided by you via our shop system. Then we go next, we choose what we need to install. Of course, we want to install the UA server as a service. So when the machine boots, the service is automatically started and the OPC UA server is available. And we create already a configuration with a default setup. The OPC UA server is quite small, so we just mentioned it here, but nevertheless, there should be enough space available on all systems. If you go next now, we need to provide the connection details to PRTG. So in our case here, we have the host name and we have the UA server now installed on the same system as PRTG. So in our case, we can stick with 1615 and the local host address. But if you install the OPC UA server on a different remote machine, a different network segment, then of course the host name needs to be the one of the PRTG core server and app server respectively. You also need to enter a valid API key, and that's what we just created before. So I copy over the API key from here and place it in here. And the tag name is what we set up before. So we can go in here and say UA export and UA export 2. That were the tags we assigned in PRTG. And that's everything we need to do basically. So we continue, and the setup is already running. The service started. So setup was successful. And one simple test inside PRTG to check if everything was successful is that you, of course, can now also monitor our own OPC UA server using our sensors. So we have the device already here, it's localhost. And I go in here and say OPC UA server. And we take the server status and create the sensor. And now we should see that our own PRTG OPC UA server is up and running. So installation was successful. Now let's start having a look at the settings so you can configure it properly. So you go into the, we need to activate the hidden items because it's in the program data folder. If you go to Paessler PRTG OPC UA Server, and here we find actually our configuration YAML, and we open it here with Notepad and see already the stuff we entered before during the installation process. So the path to our activation file, the address of PRTG and the proper port of the app server, our API key, and the UA export and export to tags we associated. If you're using self-signed certificates, so if you didn't change yet your PRTG certificate, then you also need to enable this option, allow invalid certificates to true, because by default the UA server doesn't connect to self-signed certificates because of our security best practices. So I need to change that. And then we save it. So all good to go. And now we go to services. And search for the proper PRTG OPC UA server service, as we can see here, already running. And we just give it a reboot. Now I show you how easy it is to connect basically any OPC UA client to our PRTG OPC UA server. And as I said before, in this example, I just used Inductive Automation's ignition system. So I'm here in the admin view. I go to config, go down to the OPC connections. And now we see here already connected OPC UA servers, and we just create a new OPC connection, select OPC UA, and provide the proper endpoint URL. Here it's already provided. So it's typically opc.tcp // then the host name of the system you installed the OPC UA server. So either it's the PRTG system if you installed it directly on the system, or on the remote machine you set up the UA server. And then you need to provide the proper port. So it's 4840 default OPC UA port. Now we select the server and also need to choose the proper endpoint. So our OPC UA server for PRTG supports anonymous and unencrypted connection, as well as secured and encrypted connections. So we choose here the last point with security modes, sign and encrypt, and a proper security policy. We connect. Now we get a certificate of the PRTG OPC UA server, and of course we trust the certificate. And continue. Here a quick confirmation screen, and everything is properly set up. We have here the name. We don't need to provide username and password now because right now we just connect using the anonymous option. And then everything is prepared. And now we can actually see that Ignition is connecting to the PRTG OPC UA server. So if we want to visualize the state of status, groups, or devices inside our dashboards here in Ignition, then we go to engineering solution. And we can already see here a very simple example of a manufacturing process. We have here the 2 production lines you saw before in PRTG. And now, as you can see, there's no information about the network, the IT components. It's purely about the production process, which is totally fine because that's the job of the SCADA system, right? But now we want to provide a full overview of our plant or facility. So now we can basically add here in the tag browser new devices. So go to browse devices, and we see here that our Paessler PRTG OPC UA server already connected, and I fully take that over. So I select the variables I want to have inside my SCADA system. So we have it here now, and I apply. So now we have our data available here. And as you can see, we have the sensor status summary. So that's all the information about how many sensors are currently in down state, up state, warning state for more infomercial overview. And we can simply do that by just selecting how many sensors are currently down. We don't have one, but I just drag it in here and say, please display that as a numeric value. And then we can move it in here. And if we go to warning state, then we have currently 2 sensors. So I just drag it in here, display again numeric label, and then we currently see that we have 2 sensors in our PRTG installation in warning state. But that's not very descriptive, so they just know there's something going on, but not actually what is actually happening. So if we want to visualize, for example, the state of our network group, we select the network object here, and we can see now the object ID inside PRTG of that object. We get the name, so it's the name of the group, and the status display. So status means a numerical representation of the state of the object in PRTG, and status display means basically a text representation of this certain state. So as you can see here, our group is in summed info warning. That means inside our network group we have at least 1 sensor that's in warning state. So if I want to visualize that, I can just drag the name here over. Wait a second. Say display label. So we want to show to the control engineer that we talk about the state of the network, so it's visible here. And then I prepared already a small status icon here and moved it over here. Just to give you a quick idea how it works actually. For example, here in Ignition, we can map the value we get from PRTG to a proper state of this button. So I already associated 16 with down, 17 with acknowledged, and all these states. This is properly documented in the documentation we provide with the OPC UA server, so you can do this mapping depending on your requirements on your own in your supervisory and control system. So I just go OK here, and now I simply drag the status of our network object over here, and we can clearly see that now our network group is in warning state, so that's good enough. He can now see that there is something going on and is aware of the situation. If we want to provide a more detailed level view, we can now provide, for example, the state of the sensor here that we tagged with our UA export 2 tag. So we can, for example, drag in the sensor message and display that. And in this case, it just shows currently the name of a license in this PLC basically, but we can also drag in the status. So for the sensor side, I also prepared already this button, and we can see again there's a different mapping because now we talk about a sensor instead of a group. So we have 1 to 10 as a value and assigned the proper statuses inside PRTG. So if I now move the status over here, and now we can actually see that this sensor regarding the license is up and running. Now, how does it look like if the situation changes? I can quickly demonstrate that. So I go back into my other system. And now we just pick up where we left. And we see here, that's the sensor we just saw in the SCADA screen. We see again the message name and the demo time limit. So if we want to set an alert here, I just enable alerts based on limits, and we want to go into the error state. So I just say artificially 60 is the error limit. And of course, 32 is below 60. So the sensor now goes into the error state with a proper error message. And if we now jump back into our SCADA screen, we will see in a couple of seconds that this visualization changes to also the red color. And as you can see here, the proper error message. So that's also how you can share information from within PRTG inside your control system. So now I showed you how you can easily represent PRTG data and visualize it in a control system, but the last feature set is still missing, and I'll give you a quick idea how it looks like using a different tool, debugging tool. So I use in this case Prosys OPC UA Browser as a debugging tool because it supports OPC UA alarms and conditions, so I can show you how that actually works. So I connect here to my OPC UA server, also using sign and encrypt as with Ignition. And now we get basically the same view as we have here in the SCADA screen. So we see the sensor summary, the state of our network group, the switch, and the sensor. So what is different now, I can go here into the event view and actually get an event representation of our system. So I make it a little broader. And as we can see here, there's already one alarm raised inside the system, and the state is in active true. And this alarm list view can be basically replicated in all control systems, DCS, SCADA, that supports alarms and conditions. And now comes the magic moment, so to say. I'm here in the control system or this debugging tool and say, now I want to acknowledge this alarm because all good. So imagine we are on a Sunday basically, you're working 24/7, and now I'm as a process control engineer are sitting in front of my control screen and I get this alert. Nevertheless, I realize it doesn't affect me, everything is running smoothly, so why should we now wake up the responsible IT person to fix it if it doesn't affect us yet? So I can enter another comment, all good, just fix it on Monday. So now I acknowledge inside the control system this alert, and for me as a control engineer in the system it's shown this alarm was acknowledged. So even if we have, or I have a control engineer, have a shift change afterwards, my colleagues will see that there was an alarm, but it was acknowledged by me, so everything is cool. And as we have it acknowledged here in the system, I go back to PRTG now and give it a quick update. And now you can actually see that we have the message from the control system inside PRTG, and we can see inside the sensor, all good, just fix it on Monday. So now we have the perfect sync between both systems, even though they are separate, different persons are using them, but we have a synced state in between them. And that's basically how you can leverage the full potential of the PRTG OPC UA server.